what I have come to understand is that right hemisphere brick context, all that, I was about probably sitting around 50 to 75% full of restless, irritable, and discontent, because I felt like if people were more active in government, then companies would not have taken over government and sent me over to Iraq. I vowed to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That was my moral compass. Okay? Dick Cheney was the Secretary of Defense when I was 10 years old. He paid Brown and Root Services $8.5 million to figure out how to weave in private contractors and the military. 4 years later, he then became the CEO of Kellogg Brown and Root, stayed there for 5 years before he accepted a $36 million severance package to go be a public servant again and run as W's vice president. By 2001, when we were rolling the war drums, we got to go after Iraq, he handed $8 billion to that same company in a contract that nobody else could bid for. And by the time I was in Iraq, he had already made $398,000 in deferred compensation while he was the vice president. I go there and I'm see 3 or 4 of his company drivers in between every one of my Army Freightliners. They didn't speak English. They weren't trained in tactical behaviors. They were a liability for me and put my life at risk every single mission. But I'll bet they were making better than I was. We had a doctor from India that had come and done this just because he had been sued for malpractice and needed to somehow save his family and save his livelihood. And so I know they were making pretty good money for their minds. I'm seeing guys that are employees of his simply monitoring an email sheet, making 5 times what I do as a driver. 5 times that just to sit on their ass and monitor email sheets. Now, again, libertarian Jason, I was pissed off that we had air conditioning. I wanted to rough it. I thought the American taxpayer did not need to be spending all this on foo-foo if this was a real war, right? So my actual service, after vowing to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, time and time again, is that I get to be the gun at the front of empire, making the vice president a bunch of money, making his donors a bunch of money, making his buddies a bunch of money. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and okay, post-traumatic stress disorder, great, I've gone through trauma. That explained to me the fight or flight, that explained to me the tension, but it didn't explain to me the anger. It didn't explain to me the contempt that I had for civilians in feeling like they needed to fire their incumbent every single 2 years in order to stay on top of what we needed as a society. I had never heard of something called moral injury before. A moral injury is something that happens to you that transgresses your morality. My morality was transgressed in a very high stakes situation by a legitimate authority. I was given legitimate legal commands for an unconstitutional war. And that is theory and easy and whatever until you have a gun in the face of a civilian and you have to decide whether or not that civilian actually has the trigger for the car bomb that you just passed, and whether or not you are in the moral right to defend an occupying army when all you wanted to do was defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. When it comes to that decision-making point and you've got that face right in your sight and you can't tell whether or not you need to pull that trigger finally or not, and then you don't because you feel like the occupying force, and then the car bomb goes off, you're left questioning whether or not you had the courage to kill, whether or not you did your job as a soldier, or whether or not you just completely let down 6-year-old Jason that came home from kindergarten and wanted to serve his country. After that, I was introduced to a moral engagement group in the Philadelphia VA, moral injury treatment method, which was a public ceremony in which the scripted discussion, the scripted every time I come home and I hear thank you, all I can think of is go fire your fucking incumbent. What the hell you mean thank you? I didn't do shit for you. I destabilized 2 countries and I made Dick Cheney a lot of money. That's all. It's a lot to kind of cope back to civilian life from 2006 or so till 2011. Deployed again. This time it's to Afghanistan. It's the just war, right? I really thought so. You know, the classic village stability operations is the classic Green Beret mission. Okay, the classic Green Beret mission is you take 12 guys, you have them parachute into some village, have them recruit 300 military-aged males, stand up an army, train them, and then have that army defend its village, or have that army overthrow communism, or have that army do whatever it needs to do. So I really believed in that mission. In the middle of it, I came to realize that the way of life in Afghanistan was favoritism. It was corruption, in what we saw as corruption. In Karzai's hometown, Khazaruzgan, we had a shura that looked at what we saw as the perfect model for what had worked. The Afghan local police chief was working well. They weren't playing favors for anybody. They were very fair. They were very judicious. They were very much exactly what we imagined Afghanistan ought to do. And the shura came together and they voted him out. And they said, this is wrong. This is ridiculous. He's not playing the favors that we're used to. And then his son was killed because whoever planted the bomb thought it was him driving around in his car. And then he was killed within a week. So even when it worked, it wasn't working because we have no business going there and trying to tell people how to run their lives. The way that gets into the moral injury issue for me. I'm busting my ass, risking my life, doing everything I can to try to help the people of Afghanistan, and all I get is threatened with prison because the way I'm doing it isn't according to the contract written up by whom the fuck ever between Ford Motor Company and the government of Afghanistan, as far as I can tell. Even the special forces of these United States have to wage war and build villages according to these contracts, evidently. So you can see where from then on, government seems to me like it's just those companies that want international growth donate. The politician answers to the lobbyist or the corporation, which is legally considered a person now, instead of we the people, does whatever his donor tells him to, writes up the spending package, throws it into the omnibus bill, kicks it back to the same company that helped him get elected. It's a giant money laundering scheme between Team Red Pill, that's all about the military-industrial complex, and Team Blue Pill, that seems to be all about the healthcare medicinal complex. What's the chief export of America today? Is it war or is it pandemics? In the last 25 years, since I've reached the age of majority, seems like it's Depends on which one's in office, but we're going to export one or the other. It's disgusting. That's not what I want my government doing to the rest of the world. We, the people, are being divided, the ones with heartbeats and breath, by the persons who are corporations that stand to make a lot of money through either healthcare, medicinal complex, or military-industrial complex. Meanwhile, we're tearing each other apart, supporting one side of two wings, the same freaking bird.